Today we're editing a photo from start to finish in Photoshop, including removing a subject from the background, color toning, and removing a tattoo. Hey everyone, and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Nace. You can find me on Phlearn.com, where we make learning fun. And in today's video, we're gonna show you all kinds of wonderful stuff. Basically, we're taking an image from start to finish. So this is based on a live broadcast that I did last week. So if you joined me in that live broadcast, thank you so much and welcome back. So we're just taking a stock image here and basically going through the entire process. So we got a great tutorial for you. Let's jump into Photoshop. So here's our image for today. Now you can actually download this image and today's PSD, the layered file. So you can go in and take a look at all of the layers. All that's gonna be available for free on Phlearn.com. Just follow the link right down below. So we're gonna start this off with a little outline of what we're gonna actually be working on today. Now again, this was based off of live broadcast and we had some requests in the live broadcast. So we're basically redoing some of those requests. So we're gonna remove this subject from the background. We've got some really great tools and techniques to show you how to do that. We're actually going to be removing this tattoo from our subject as well. I'm going to show you how to recreate skin tone as well as skin texture where that tattoo is. We're not going to do all of them. That would just take a long time, but you can use the same techniques that we're going to show you how to do that to get rid of all of them. And we're going to go ahead and take care of just some of these areas like some reflections in our subject's sunglasses. And we've got some bright areas on our subject's face. And then we're going to go ahead and just tone this at the end. So we're going to add some color toning, and I'm going to show you a few ways to do that. So the before and after for this is going to be fantastic. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to create a new layer and start getting rid of this subject in the back. So my suggestion for this on a new layer is to use the spot healing brush tool. My type up here is set to content aware, and I've got sample all layers checked. Super important. So we're gonna make a brush a little bit larger and start painting out our subject. Now, for object removal, I always recommend starting with the spot healing brush tool because it honestly just does a really good job. And most of the time, this is the only tool that you need. There are cases in which you might wanna use the regular healing brush tool or even the clone stamp tool. And we're gonna show you some of those use cases today. But for the most part, this tool does a great job, especially right here. It's just kind of like covered by ocean, you know, so it's pretty simple for this tool. Like there's not a lot of hard areas. But when we get down over here next to our subject shirt, let's go ahead and show you what happens. So if I want to remove some of this stuff, now we're starting to get into an area where it's like, ooh, not looking that great. The tool's having a little bit of a hard time figuring out what to do there. Even if we just do a small area, we can see it's just having a little bit of a hard time. So we're gonna switch tools to something that's a little bit less automatic, something that we have a little bit more control over. So we're gonna use the clone stamp. Now, if I just grab the clone stamp tool, which I can just grab a clone stamp tool on a new layer, just make sure you're sampling current and below and start painting it in, it's gonna remove that object, but the problem is you're gonna start to see, I'm just painting right over my subject shirt and we don't want that. So let's hit undo a couple times. What we really wanna do is make a selection out of our subject. So I just remove the background and I don't affect my subject. And to do that, we're gonna use the pen tool. So let's hit P for the pen tool. There we go. We're just gonna kind of click and drag. That's the whole deal with the pen tool. It's just clicking and dragging. So you can see click and drag. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option to change directions. And then here we go again, clicking and dragging, boom. Alt or Option to change directions and click and drag. There we go, Alt or Option, boop, and click and drag that again. So Alt or Option, anytime you have a direction change or you want like a hard edge, there we go, just hold Alt or Option and pretty much just clicking and dragging with this pen tool. Now, there are some options that I have selected. I'll show you in just a second that actually make this much easier. There we are. So let's go ahead and zoom out here, and in just a second, we're gonna have a perfect selection right around the arm. I probably don't even need to go this low because I'm not removing this distraction. There we go. And then we just click right up here, boop, and join that up together. So let's go ahead to our paths. I'm gonna double click on our paths and we're just gonna call this arm. It's right near her arm. Now, as far as our pen tool is concerned, the options that I would recommend using, let's go ahead and just create a new path so I can show you. I like to go up to my little gear icon here and turn on rubber band, and that gives me a little preview of what I'm gonna create. So if I click and drag here, you see now I've got a little preview here, this little like blinky line. That's not gonna be there if you don't have rubber band turned on. So you can see here, I can still make my pen path, but it's a little bit harder to predict where it's gonna go. So if you turn on rubber band, which I think should be on by default because it makes it so much easier, you get a good idea of what your pen tool is doing. And again, just click and drag to make curves, and I'm just gonna go pop, continue to my original line. So you can see it's really easy to like basically follow any shape. So if you're trying to select something that's a hard edge, pen tool is the way to go. And by hard edge, I basically mean anything except for like hair or clouds and things like that. So like, you know, the edge of your arm or like a car or a building, pen tool is awesome. So let's go back to our arm selection that I just made. Again, I don't need the left side of the selection to be particularly nice or follow anything. The right side is important. I just needed to follow her arm. So we're gonna go ahead and make this a selection. Let's right click here on our arm path. I'm gonna go to make selection and let's just feather this by 1.5 pixels. The reason we're doing that is as you zoom into an image, you're gonna see the edge of her shoulder and her arm, it's not like super sharp edge, right? It's got a little bit of blur to it. So you wanna feather your selection with your pen tool, and that's gonna make it look a lot more realistic. So now that I have this selection, let's go ahead and create a new layer. I can go, if my brush tool, for instance, look at this. If I paint around my image, the only thing I can paint in is inside of that selection. Okay, so that's kind of what our goal is, just to make this area selection. If I grab my clone stamp tool, I'm still only gonna be able to affect this area. Let's use our clone stamp tool. S for the clone stamp tool. Now we're gonna sample out here. There we go, and start painting in. And now we can see perfectly able to remove that subject from the background and not at all affecting this subject, okay? Because again, I can only paint in this area. So I'm gonna hit Controller Command H. It's gonna hide this little dotted line. It's really helpful to hide that when we're working like this because I can't really see what I'm doing that well. So hit Controller Command H. If this is your first time hitting Controller Command H, it might ask, do you wanna hide Photoshop or hide the extras? Just hit hide extras. There we go. And look at this, I'm just sampling right up there, and because I already have my selection active, look how easy this is. It's actually like, I feel like I'm cheating. That's how easy it is. It's like, ooh, okay, cool. And there we go. That person is gone from the background, just like that. So again, having that selection allows us to just paint in that area. Now I'm gonna just create a new layer real quick and kind of paint back some of these rocks. There we go. You just kind of make it up because it's blurred rocks in the background and you just want to make it look like rocks. Okay, well, we did it. So that person is gone. Let's go ahead and group all those layers together and check that out. Boom, object removal from that guy in the background. All right, I'm just gonna call this background subject. So they're gone. Look how easy that was. Pretty cool stuff. So the next thing we're going to work on are some of these areas on our subject's face, just some reflections in her glasses and some sunlight. These are not like, whatever, it's just light on her face, right? There's nothing wrong with this image. It's just a little bit distracting. So we're gonna start off with our spot healing brush tool again. It's kind of my go-to. It works really well most of the time. Sometimes it doesn't do exactly what you want, and then it's time to use the regular healing brush tool. But in this case, it's actually working pretty well. Let's go ahead and paint this over her face. You can see this doesn't look exactly natural. Okay, not perfect there. So let's go ahead and swap out to the regular healing brush tool. There we go. And go ahead and just paint this in. So with the regular healing brush tool, you get to control where you sample, okay? So just hold Alt or Option and sample a point and then paint over what you don't want. There we go. And it's just gonna blend everything together. And it does a really, really nice job here. You can even take care of like little red marks and stuff like that if your subject has like, you know, little spots or whatever. Super, super cool. So you can see really pretty quick. I want to take care of this area on her forehead as well. So we're just gonna, again, use our spot healing brush tool. So again, I just sampled right under her forehead. So hold Alt or Option and sample right there. Boop. Super, super easy. And then we're just painting right over top of this area. Now, sometimes you're just gonna get a result like that where things aren't blending together that well. In that case, you can go back in and just kind of like paint a little bit more. So if you don't get what you want, you know, you don't have to really undo it. You can just keep going more and more. Like you can see there's a little dark dot there. So I'm just gonna sample under there and paint right over that. So just kind of keep going. That's really the key to success with this tool. And then that actually looks pretty good. On a new layer, I'm just gonna grab my brush tool and paint with like a super low flow just to kind of smooth this over. Now our brush tool is not really gonna allow us to have skin texture because it's literally just the brush tool. But we're gonna show you how to get around that in just a second when we take care of her arm. All right, let's go ahead and call that distractions. All right, well, check this out. Super easy to do. These are just the type of things that we run into all the time when we're taking pictures and want to do a little retouching. So already, look at this, before and after, pretty awesome. Next thing we're gonna do is remove one of her tattoos. Now, I personally have tattoos. I love tattoos, so I'm all about it. But in the live broadcast, someone was curious, hey, how do we remove some tattoos? So I was like, I'll show you how to do it. It's actually easier than you would think. So what we're gonna do is use the brush tool. Believe it or not, we're gonna use the brush tool to remove this tattoo. Now, I already made a path of her arm. There we go. So we can actually use this, but I do wanna cut it off on the top and the bottom. So let's show you how to use this pen path that we already made because that's basically gonna give us a border on the left-hand side. Super cool. So this arm pen path, we'll just right click on this and go to make selection, 1.5 pixels, looks good. Okay, we're gonna go back to our layers, let's create a new layer. Now, what we did is just selected this area, right? So like if I grab my brush tool, okay, let's just grab this color here, that's where I can paint. So I need the opposite of that. We're gonna go to select and down to inverse, and now I can paint anywhere except for that area, okay? So this is gonna be perfect when it comes to painting in over top of this little tattoo. And we're gonna do this with the brush tool. So again, let's hit Control or Command H because I don't want those dotted lines there. What we're gonna do, here's the real secret, is to bring your flow really low. So like a 10% flow is perfect for this. Okay, so I'm on a new layer, B for the brush tool, opacity for the brush is 100%, flow is 10%, and I'm gonna hold Alt or Option to sample some colors. Now, if I paint a little bit over a t-shirt or something like that, no big deal. I can always just layer mask that out. So I'm not too worried about that. But let's go ahead and sample here and start painting. But you'll notice it's not gonna let me paint outside of the arm, right? Because I have my selection. If I hit Control or Command H again, you can see that selection's there. So we're gonna choose a large soft edge brush. We're choosing a large brush because I want, there we go. I want this to like fade from one color to another very, very smoothly. And if you use a small brush, then it really kind of makes all of your brush strokes pretty apparent. So the larger brush stroke that you use, it simply makes it more obvious. I'm also going to change this layer blend mode from normal down to lighten. There we go. And that's just going to keep it from basically being visible in areas I don't want it to be visible, like over top this shadow, for instance, right? Actually, it is visible over the top of that shadow. Never mind. What am I talking about? Let's change this back to normal. That didn't work the way I thought it was going to work. All right. I forgot that shadows are dark. There we go. Well, this is looking pretty good. We're literally just painting with the brush tool. Now, I'm going to go ahead and layer mask this. So let's just pop a layer mask on there and paint black on our layer mask over top of the t-shirt, right? Because I just don't want this to be visible there. Over top this little other tattoo. Looking good. So we're off to a pretty good start. Now, we don't have a lot of, there we go. We don't have a lot of roundness, three-dimensionality to the arm because there's no real like highlight there. You know, it looks pretty dang flat. So on a new layer, we're just gonna grab our brush tool. I'm gonna paint a little bit of shadow on here, okay, just on the right-hand side there. And then I'm gonna grab like a brighter color from our subject's skin. Let's just do something like this, right? Okay, and we're gonna paint some highlight right here on our subject's arm. There we go. Okay, now this layer here, fantastic. A little bit too visible and it's a little bit too well defined. So we're just gonna blur it a little bit. Let's go to filter, blur. I'm gonna Gaussian blur that a little bit. There we are, and then lower the opacity down to like 70%. But now you can see we're starting to get a little bit more definition. Okay, and again, you can just layer mask this away from this shirt here and from down there. Fantastic, but you can see it's only visible over top of her arm. Okay, now we got one more layer, and for this, what we're gonna do is I wanna turn my pen path back into a selection, the arm selection. Okay, so let's go ahead and make this a selection once more. Really cool. Now, check this out. This is actually gonna be super cool. I'm gonna use my brush tool and I'm gonna sample this super bright color in our subject's skin, okay? And I'm just gonna paint this right here, right on the outside of our subject's arm. See that? Okay. Now, I just wanna shift my selection a little bit to the left. So I'm gonna hit M for my marquee tool. It just switches to any selection tool. And then I can use the left and right arrows to kind of nudge this. So you can see I'm gonna use the left arrow just a couple times. There we go, that looks pretty good. And then just hit delete. All right, so what we have now is this little line, I'm just moving it, you know, out of place. I have this little line of highlight that I can then move to the right, okay? I'm gonna give it a little bit of a blur, so we'll go to filter, blur, and over here to Gaussian blur, just a little bit of a blur. You don't wanna go too much. There we go. Trying to match the other line there. That looks pretty good. And then I want this to only be visible where this layer is visible. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna just pop these together real quick. Okay, now this layer, I don't want it to be visible outside there, so I'm gonna clip it. Option Command G is gonna clip this layer to only be visible right there. Check that out. So literally just built in a highlight on the other side of her arm. See how flat it looks right now? And that's because, take a look at this area over here. Like the edge of your arm actually shows some light from like behind. So you need some of that light to wrap around in order for something to look more three-dimensional. So boop, turn that back on. And would you look at that? All right, looks a lot more realistic, doesn't it? And you can even just do that again with like a super low flow and boom, I'm just gonna paint that in right over here. There we go. To exaggerate that a little bit more. So we have this one, okay? And then this other one, and then I'm just gonna like really bring that down to like 20% opacity. So pretty flat looking arm, and here we have some depth. Pretty neat. Now the only thing we really need to take care of here is texture, because she doesn't have any skin texture left in her arm. We removed it all because we just painted that with the brush tool. Isn't that pretty cool to know that you can just paint a new arm with a brush tool? It's awesome. We just need skin texture, and you can get that from anywhere in a photo, anywhere you have skin texture. So what we're gonna do is on a new layer, I'm gonna just grab her neck skin texture with a clone stamp tool. So we're just gonna clone stamp her neck right over there, okay? Let me just put it over here because it was cutting her neck off a little bit. There we go. I'll need your neck for this, please. All right. Now, how do we get her skin texture of her neck over top of her arm? First thing we're gonna do is just kind of make it a little bit bigger. How do we get her skin texture from her neck over her arm? Well, we're gonna use our high pass filter, which is traditionally used for sharpening, but when you think about sharpening, all it's doing is enhancing detail. So I wanna extract the detail, the little texture from her skin, and then put that back over her arm. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna desaturate that, Shift Command U, it's going to desaturate her neck. Now we're going to right click and go ahead and convert that to a smart object. We're going to change our layer from normal down to overlay. Okay, this is basically the same thing you would do to sharpen. And then we're going to run a high pass filter. You can just go to filter, other, and over to here to high pass. There we go. And let's zoom in here. Now we can change our radius to see the different textures. So a low radius, you're not going to see any texture. And the higher radius you go up, see that skin texture? But if you go too high, you're going to see a little bit too much skin texture. So that looks really good there, actually. So look at this. This is just skin texture now that I can just put wherever I want. I know, it's insane, right? Like, what? Photoshop trickery. And I'm just going to do this twice because I need some for the bottom and some for the top. So let's just put a layer mask on that, invert our layer mask, and then I'll just paint white on the layer mask here. There we go, right over top of her arm. Like, what? Are you kidding me? How is this so awesome? There we go. And then I'll just duplicate that. Boop, beep, beep, super easy. If you say boop, beep, beep, then that's how you know it's super easy. Okay, there we go. And I'll just, cool. Well, you know what? On top of that, we can just use our spot healing brush tool. There we go. I'm just on a new layer. I'm just going to remove a couple of these marks so it doesn't look like we got the same thing repeating. But what? Would you look at that? All right, so let's go ahead and show you. I'm just going to call this arm paint. There we go. And then we're going to call this skin texture. So here we have our original, okay, arm painted right over that. That's just has it's in its own group. So we can put a layer mask on that, like, because I don't want it to be visible necessarily in this area. Just fade it in there. Perfect. All right, there we go. And then skin texture. This is what really sells it. So I can just turn this texture off and on. And now that looks like an arm, right? By golly, it's an arm. So, wow, right? There's our before and our after. Super, super easy way to do things like, I mean, we took a large portion and basically repainted our arm. So you could do a lot with this same technique. So really, really cool. Alrighty, and the last thing we went over in the live broadcast was a little bit of color toning, and I'm going to show you my favorite technique from that broadcast. We're going to use solid color fill layers. So let's go to a solid color, which is like, are you kidding me, solid color? I used Photoshop. I mean, I've been using Photoshop for like 15 years, a long, long time. I started in high school, and I'm 36 right now. So, yeah, almost 20 years. Jeez. Anyway, I didn't use the solid color fill layer for most of that time. Just in the last couple of years have I gotten an appreciation for it, but it's really, really great. You can use it to color tone, all types of different stuff. So let's just create a solid color fill layer. I'm gonna just grab a blue color. It doesn't matter what color you use because, well, you can just change it at any time. So now that we have this color here, we're gonna change our blend mode from normal down to lighten. Okay, and then this color literally just lightens up the shadows. So if we want this to change colors, just double click right there, and now you can change colors. And you can see as I change colors, because this is set to a lighten blend mode, it's gonna automatically just lighten up the darks of my image. And the lighter I go with this color, the more it's gonna affect my image. So it's a really cool way to tone your images because you can just dial everything in so easily. So bringing some blue into the shadows, no problem. We're going to do the same thing with the highlights. Let's just grab like a nice, warm, bright color here. And this time we're going to set this from normal down to darken. Double click on there. And here's where we just change our little settings and get it. See, if you go real dark, it's just going to darken more. But if you change your settings, get like nice and subtle with this. That looks really nice there. So there we go. Taking care of the highlights. Let's do this a little bit more. I'm going to just bring this a little darker. It's going to take care of a little bit more. Fantastic. Now, I do like these. I think this one could be a little bit more red, so let's pull this down a little bit more. I like these effects, but they're a little bit too much, so we're going to group them together. I'm going to hit V for my move tool, and then you can use 1 through 0 on your keyboard to change your opacity. So I'm going to hit 5, and that's just changed this entire group to 50% opacity. Okay. We'll just call this color grade. And there we go. We are done with this image. Let's take a look at it before and after. This is so much fun. So let's just turn all of these off. Here's our before. We got this person fishing in the background, or I don't know that they're fishing. They could just be hanging out. You can see we have some light distractions on our subject here and a tattoo and no color grade. So removing our subject from the background, remember what we did with our pen tool to make a selection around her arm. We went ahead and removed those distractions around our subject's face. This is all non-destructive. You can turn this off and on at any time. If you're like, you know what, I liked most of it, but I think she probably should have had, you know, this visible on her forehead, just paint it back. Boom. And actually, I do think it looks good. Super easy to do. Next, we've got our arm. This is just the paint, or as I wrote, painty. My arm painty. The arm paint, and then the skin texture back over top, and then the color grade. And I think this looks great. In fact, you know what? I think this arm paint, see, this is the other cool thing about non-destructive editing is, there we go. I think we needed to just make a little bit more of this visible. And actually, I think we need to bring this shadow up there just a little bit. You want to do this without your color grade being visible, by the way. There we go. It was looking a little bit fake, right? There we go. We'll just sample that, paint it back in. Bring in just a little bit of like randomness. It's gonna help it look more real. There we go. See, before, after. Yeah, it looks way more real after. This is the other really nice thing about non-destructive editing is you can make these changes at any time. There we go. We'll turn our color grade back on and we're good to go. Check that out. So here's our before and our after. So many wonderful techniques just in one image. Now, don't forget, you guys are going to be able to download not only this JPEG, but the PSD, the layered file, the exact one that I just made on Phlearn.com, absolutely free. Just follow the link right down below. Well, everyone, thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. And for everyone who tuned into the live broadcast, thank you for that as well. I had an absolute blast getting to connect with you. Thanks again. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone.